Imagine walking away from a massive corporate merger, right?
Right.
And you pocket a $2.8 billion breakup fee. You totally destroy Wall Street's profit expectations by double digits.
Yep.
And then
Wake up the next morning and your stock is tanked.
exactly, it drops 9%. I mean, that is the multi-billion-dollar paradox Netflix just pulled off. So we are jumping straight into it today.
Yeah, we have a lot to cover.
We really do. Welcome, by the way. I want to speak directly to you, the Internet Podcast listener, joining today's deep dive, wherever you happen to be tuning in from. Our mission today is to decode Netflix's Q1 2026 earnings.
Because we have to figure out how a company can win so definitively on paper, yet, get punished so aggressively by the market.
It makes no sense at first glance.
It really doesn't.
Yeah.
It kind of defies the conventional gravity of investing. When you shatter expectations, you naturally expect green arrows.
Right, you expect the stock to go up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But to figure out the mechanics of this disconnect, we had to tear through like a mountain of primary sources.
Yeah, the official Q1 earnings call transcript, the detailed shareholder letter.
And the raw, immediate market reactions playing out on CNBC and Bloomberg TV. We look closely at financial analysts like Tom Rogers and Ross Gerber.
Okay, so let's unpack this because we need to start right at the epicenter of the paradox. If you isolate just the spreadsheet, Netflix had an undeniably stellar first quarter.
Oh, absolutely. The numbers were huge.
They hit $12.25 billion in revenue, which is a 16% year-over-year growth rate.
Yeah, and their operating margins climbed to 32.3%.
Which is insane. That's a level of profitability legacy studios would, literally kill for right now.
Totally. And their net income reached a staggering $5.28 billion.
Right. So the fundamentals are historically robust.
They are. But Wall Street operates on forward momentum, right? Not just past performance. When you look at their reported EPS, that's earnings per share of $1.23, you have to realize the market instantly discounted it.
Okay, wait, explain that for a second. Why would they discount a massive profit?
Because that number was artificially heavily inflated by the $2.8 billion termination fee they collected.
Ah, from when the Warner Brothers deal collapsed?
Exactly. Analysts aren't pricing Netflix's future based on a one-time cash windfall. They're modeling out recurring subscription revenue.
Right, because you can't rely on failed mergers to pay the bills every quarter.
Exactly. Once you mentally strip away that breakup fee, the underlying growth narrative suddenly looks, well, a lot less explosive.
Which brings us to the guidance. Netflix posted these massive numbers, but then they outright refused to raise their full-year revenue guidance.
Yeah, they kept it pegged at 12 to 14%.
Right. And on top of that, they've entirely stopped reporting quarterly subscriber numbers. Now, I saw Ross Gerber on Bloomberg arguing that this is intentional.
The Apple playbook comparison, right?
Yeah, exactly. He said they are running the Apple playbook. By keeping guidance conservative and hiding the subscriber count, they're just managing expectations so they can easily clear the bar next quarter.
Right.
But I have to push back on that assessment a little bit. Is keeping expectations low a sign of masterful confidence? Or is it, an admission that the explosive growth phase of streaming is actually over?
Honestly, that is the defining tension of this entire earnings cycle.
Yeah.
I mean, think about when Apple stopped reporting iPhone unit sales years ago.
Right. The market freaked out at first.
They did, but Apple did it because the market was saturated. They wanted investors to focus on the overall revenue they could extract per user through services, rather than just the raw number of devices sold.
And Netflix is making that exact same pivot.
Exactly. They want the focus on engagement and profit margins.
Yeah.
But Wall Street hates a vacuum of information.
They really do.
Without those subscriber numbers, investors lose their primary compass.
Right.
So the 9% stock drop wasn't a rejection of the $12 billion in revenue.
It was a rejection of the uncertainty.
Precisely. It forces the market to look much, much closer at how Netflix is actually deploying its capital.
Okay, before we analyze these specific corporate strategies, market maneuvers, and the entities involved, I actually need to share this note with you. Jerem jo osa samasha, yo tuser, which is crucial context as we dissect the decisions of a company operating at this massive scale.
Definitely. And the most massive decision they made this quarter wasn't something they did, it was something they didn't do.
The Warner Brothers Discovery deal.
Yes. In the earnings call, co-CEO Ted Sarandos explicitly stated that acquiring Warner Brothers was a nice-to-have, not a need-to-have.
That's a bold statement in M&A.
Wait, real quick. Let's define M&A for the listener.
Sure. So M&A stands for mergers and acquisitions. It's basically the corporate strategy of buying other companies to grow your own business rather than building everything from scratch. Right. And Sarandos argued that putting corporate ego aside and walking away when the integration became too complex, that actually proved their internal investment discipline.
Which is a profound shift in their market posture. Historically, Netflix has always been a builder.
Yeah, they built their own streaming infrastructure. They built their global studio apparatus from the ground up.
Right. The Warner Brothers deal would have instantly granted them a century-old library of legacy IP.
Huh.
But, legacy IP comes attached to legacy infrastructure.
And, more importantly, a mountain of legacy debt.
Exactly.
The financial analysts we tracked were incredibly vocal about this. Ross Gerber bluntly called Warner Brothers a dog loaded with debt that essentially kills any acquiring company that tries to absorb it.
Yeah, he didn't hold back.
He didn't. And Tom Rogers echoed that sentiment on CNBC. He called the decision to walk away an incredibly smart move.
Now, to be totally clear, those are strictly the assessments of Gerber and Rogers.
Yes, absolutely. We aren't here to endorse their critiques of Warner Brothers or any specific media entity. We're staying neutral on that. But what we are observing is the market actively rewarding Netflix's restraint.
Right, because the broader financial community deeply respects the discipline of protecting the balance sheet.
Mergers of that magnitude usually paralyze a company for years, right?
Completely. You spend years trying to integrate competing corporate cultures, untangle redundant operations. It's a mess.
Yeah.
Netflix avoided that paralysis.
It's kind of like being hired to renovate a sprawling, historic estate.
Okay, I like this analogy.
You bring your crew, you pull back the drywall, you realize the foundation is actively sinking into a sinkhole, and you just say, I'm out.
Right.
And somehow the owner still has to pay you a $2.8 billion cancellation fee just for showing up.
It's unbelievable. Netflix dodged a structural nightmare and literally got paid to do it.
But avoiding a debt trap isn't enough on its own. A company valued this highly still has to show Wall Street massive top-line growth.
Yeah, and if they aren't buying growth through legacy acquisitions, they're forced to invent it organically.
Which requires them to fundamentally redefine what they are to the consumer. And here's where it gets really interesting. Because they aren't just trying to dominate your living room anymore.
No, they are quietly launching an invasion into the middle of your workday.
The pivot toward daytime and mobile engagement is just entirely by design.
It has to be. For years, Netflix owned your evening. You sit on the couch after dinner, you turn on the TV. But that specific window of time is saturated.
Right. There are only so many evening hours in a day.
Exactly. So to keep expanding their footprint, they have to capture your attention during the hours you traditionally would never open a streaming app.
Hence the massive push into podcasts. They were bringing on heavy hitters like Brian Williams and Evan Roskatz.
Because a podcast doesn't require your visual attention.
Exactly. Which means they can capture you during your commute or, while you're at the gym or even while you're sitting at your desk working.
The data highlighted in their shareholder letter totally confirms this. Podcast consumption heavily indexes to daytime hours and mobile devices.
It is a calculated land grab for the hours between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m.
Yes, it is. But they're also addressing the other major vulnerability of their historical model, which is the lack of urgency.
Right, because the binge model essentially killed appointment viewing.
You can watch a whole season of Stranger Things whenever you want.
Exactly, but you can't binge a baseball game 3 weeks after it happens, which is why their live sports strategy is accelerating so aggressively.
The World Baseball Classic is the perfect example here.
The numbers are wild. It was the most watched program in Netflix history in Japan. It pulled in 31.4 million viewers.
That is a massive chunk of the country.
It is. And more importantly, it drove their largest single sign-up day ever in that region.
See, live sports command an absolute premium because they mandate immediate, synchronized viewing.
Everyone has to watch at the exact same time.
Right. That urgency drives new subscriptions in a way that a back catalog of sitcoms simply cannot. It's exactly why they are actively in talks to expand their relationship with the NFL.
And at the same time, they're targeting the exact opposite end of the demographic spectrum with the Netflix Playground app for kids.
Yeah, the kids app is fascinating.
It's totally ad-free, included in the basic subscription, and it features massive IP like Peppa Pig and Dr. Seuss. But let's pause on that point for a second.
Sure.
By launching daytime podcasts, aggressively bidding on live sports, and building a walled garden kids gaming ecosystem, aren't they at risk of losing their core identity?
How do you mean?
Like, if you try to be everything to everyone, don't you usually end up diluting the premium brand you spent 2 decades building?
It's a completely valid strategic concern. But co-CEO Greg Peters framed their philosophy brilliantly on the call. They no longer view themselves strictly as a movie and TV service.
What do they view themselves as, then?
Their goal is to win more moments of truth.
Moments of truth. I love the framing of that.
It changes the entire paradigm. A moment of truth is that split second when a consumer pulls out their phone or sits at their computer and decides they want to be entertained.
So if you choose Spotify for a podcast, Netflix lost that moment.
Exactly. If you open a mobile game, Netflix lost. Their strategy is to build an inescapable, interconnected ecosystem.
Oh, I see. So you initially subscribe to watch the live NFL game.
Right.
But you stay because your kids are locked into the ad-free Peppa Pig game.
Right.
And you've developed a habit of listening to their news podcast on your drive to work.
Yes. Each disparate format feeds the overall ecosystem. It creates a level of stickiness that drastically reduces their churn rate.
But producing and maintaining that massive multi-format ecosystem requires immense capital, which brings us to the question of who they are actually fighting for that attention.
Right. The competition.
We've spent years talking about the streaming wars as Netflix versus Disney or Netflix versus traditional cable. But Nielsen recently changed its methodology, and the data suggests the battleground has completely shifted.
The Nielsen adjustment is really fascinating. They tweaked their calculation math, which suddenly made streaming look a bit smaller on paper compared to traditional broadcast TV.
But Netflix didn't seem to care at all.
No. Leadership completely brushed it off during the earnings call. They pointed out that it was merely an accounting change, not an actual reflection of shifting consumer behavior.
Right, because they have the internal data. They know exactly how many hours are actually being watched.
Exactly. They know they're winning that fight.
But dismissing traditional cable doesn't mean they don't have an apex predator to worry about. Tom Rogers issued a massive warning on CNBC.
He did. He pointed out that YouTube currently commands 50% greater TV viewership than Netflix.
50%? That's not just a lead. That's a completely different weight class.
It is a staggering volume metric, and it really highlights the fundamental asymmetry of the new media landscape.
Because YouTube's content is largely user-generated.
Exactly. It's virtually free for them to acquire, while Netflix burns billions of dollars annually producing premium Hollywood content.
And Rogers argued the real intermediate-term threat isn't just YouTube's current volume. It's the weaponization of AI on platforms like YouTube.
Yeah, the barrier to entry for high-quality video production is plummeting right now.
So how does a premium subscription service counter an army of millions of independent creators suddenly armed with generative AI?
By buying their own AI and giving it to Hollywood.
Wow. Okay, unpack that.
Well, Netflix's recent acquisition of the tech startup Interpositive, which, by the way, was co-founded by Ben Affleck, is their direct countermove here.
Right. So what does Interpositive actually do for them?
They aren't acquiring AI to replace human directors or writers. They're acquiring it to fundamentally alter the cost structure of premium production.
Talk me through the mechanics of that. Like, how does an AI tool actually change the burn rate of a massive studio shoot?
It all comes down to pre-visualization and efficiency.
Okay.
If a director can use generative AI to precisely visualize lighting, set design, and visual effects before a single crew member even arrives on set, the savings are astronomical.
Because you aren't paying hundreds of people to stand around while you figure out the shot.
Exactly. It reduces the need for expensive physical reshoots, it speeds up the post-production pipeline, and it improves on-set safety.
So it allows Netflix to maintain that premium cinematic quality advantage over YouTube, but at a significantly lower cost per hour of content.
You got it. They are essentially trying to widen the moat by making Hollywood-level production cheaper for themselves before everyday creators catch up.
But even with AI-driven cost savings, running a global sports, gaming, and premium content ecosystem requires serious cash flow.
Yes, it does.
Which leads us to the monetization pivot. Netflix is publicly aiming to double its ad revenue to $3 billion this year.
That's a huge jump.
It is, and they are doing it by leaning heavily into DSPs, which are demand-side platforms. Now, if I'm understanding the architecture of this strategy correctly, this completely removes the human bottleneck from their ad sales.
It does. It completely revolutionizes their monetization scalability.
How did it used to work?
Well, in the traditional TV advertising model, A human salesperson from the network had to physically call an ad agency, negotiate a CPM rate, and manually place a commercial.
Which sounds incredibly slow.
It was slow, boutique, and highly inefficient.
Mm-hmm.
A DSP, on the other hand, is essentially an automated matchmaking algorithm.
So they are replacing the traditional ad sales team with a programmatic dashboard.
Exactly.
An advertiser logs in, sets their budget, defines their target demographic down to the ZIP code and their viewing habits, and instantly buys ad space across Netflix's network without ever talking to a human being.
Yes.
How much does that actually impact the bottom line, though?
Drastically. By opening their inventory to programmatic DSPs, Netflix has suddenly made it frictionless for over 4,000 different advertisers to bid on space.
4,000?
Yeah, and many of those are companies who couldn't historically afford traditional premium TV ad buys.
Right, because the minimum spend used to be too high.
Exactly. So it guarantees higher fill rates for their ad breaks and turns their advertising tier into a massive, scalable revenue engine.
So just to recap the sheer scale of what is happening right now, they are automating a multi-billion-dollar ad business.
Yeah.
Acquiring generative AI tools to change Hollywood's cost structure,
Right.
expanding into live global sports and daytime podcasts, and doing all of this while successfully dodging a massive, debt-heavy legacy media merger.
It is a massive undertaking.
Navigating a transition of this magnitude requires incredibly steady leadership, which makes the governance shift announced this quarter so monumental.
It truly marks the end of an era. Reed Hastings, the co-founder of Netflix, announced he is officially stepping down from the board of directors.
The anecdote Ted Saranda shared on the call about that really struck me.
Oh, about 1999.
Yeah. He said that back in 1999, when the company was literally just a handful of people mailing DVDs in red envelopes, Reed was already talking about succession planning.
That is foresight right there.
It really is. He told Ted his ultimate goal was to build an institution that could thrive long after he was gone. Sarandos called him an artful leader. And, you rarely see that level of ego-free transition in tech or entertainment.
It's exceptionally rare. I mean, founders generally hold on to board seats for life.
Right, they never want to let go.
But handing over power systematically over several years and then stepping away entirely to let the new co-CEOs fully run the enterprise, that speaks to a deeply disciplined corporate culture.
It actually mirrors the exact discipline they showed by walking away from the Warner Brothers deal.
That's a great point. It's the same mindset.
So what does this all mean? We've covered a massive amount of ground today, analyzing everything from algorithmic ad sales to the psychology of the modern consumer.
It's a lot to digest.
To synthesize this deep dive for our listener, what would you say are the core pillars of the new Netflix reality?
If we distill all the sources and financial data down, I think it rests on 4 distinct pillars.
Okay, let's hear them.
Pillar number 1. The underlying financials and profit margins are historically strong, but the market is heavily discounting the Warner Brothers breakup fee. Wall Street is jittery because Netflix's decision to stop providing subscriber data created a vacuum of information, forcing investors to trust management's vision over raw metrics.
Got it. And pillar number 2 would be their M&A strategy, right?
Exactly. Pillar 2 is that their M&A discipline is razor sharp. By walking away from the Warner Brothers deal, they signal to the market that they prioritize a clean balance sheet over legacy IP. They just refuse to take on the massive debt loads that are currently suffocating their traditional media rivals.
Which naturally leads to pillar 3, inventing organic growth.
Right. Because they aren't buying legacy studios, they have to expand their total addressable market. They're executing a strategy to capture every possible moment of truth in a consumer's day.
Right. Moving beyond evening movies.
Yes. Actively pushing into live urgency with sports, daytime engagement with podcasts, and ecosystem retention through ad-free kids gaming.
And finally, pillar 4.
Pillar 4 is acknowledging the true competitor. The existential threat isn't Disney or legacy cable. It's the massive volume of user-generated content on platforms like YouTube.
The AI threat.
Exactly. The next era of the streaming wars will be dictated by AI, and Netflix is aggressively arming its creative pipeline with tools from companies like Interpositive to lower their burn rate while maintaining their premium quality advantage.
It is just a phenomenal corporate pivot to witness in real time. But it leaves us with a final, slightly uncomfortable thought to ponder as we wrap up today's deep dive.
Okay, what is it?
We just talked about how Netflix is leveraging generative AI to keep their production costs down and stay ahead of everyday creators on YouTube, right?
Right.
But let's project this out 5 or 10 years. If the capabilities of generative AI continue compounding at this exponential rate, we will eventually reach a tipping point where everyday creators in their bedrooms have access to the exact same high-level production, writing, and visual effects capabilities as Netflix's top directors.
Wow.
If that day comes, will Netflix's billions of dollars in premium content still be an unbeatable moat? Or will the lines between amateur and professional storytelling disappear entirely?
That is the multi-trillion-dollar existential question for the entire global entertainment industry.
It really is. Something to think about the next time you pull out your phone and decide who gets your next moment of truth. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into Netflix's Q1 2026 reality. We appreciate you taking the time to learn with us, and we'll see you next time.